this is me, Franz the Executioner, and in this video, I am going to be teaching about the life of the executioner, specifically in the medieval and Renaissance period. So the executioners did not have easy lives at all. They were, in many areas, seen as undesirable, and they had quite a tough life. It was a very isolating line of work, and a lot of challenges came with it. However, how executioners were treated, the laws and the rules the executioner had to abide by did vary from region to region. So, I can tell you that in most areas, the executioner had to either live near undesirable places or live on the outskirts of the society where their work is, where they work, basically. And that is because of the nature of their job. Their job was seen as undesirable and dirty because they were the people that would take a life legally on command. So just the thought of that, even in today's time period, is heavily not liked, and understandably so. It's a scary thought that somebody could just end up becoming a legal executioner, and a lot of people don't understand that a lot of times these people had no choice. And just that they can kill on command. That is a scary thought for a lot of people, and that was the case even in the Middle Ages and Renaissance period. So, in some areas, the executioner also had to have his house painted bright red, so they could identify that, hey, that's where the executioner lives. So yes, it was a very isolating life. The executioners typically did not have friends outside of the realm of other executioners and torturers and their families. And honestly, like children that are born into families where the father is an executioner, usually the son would also become an executioner. It did run down the family because nobody else wanted the job. So that was one way someone could become an executioner. Another way someone could become an executioner is that if there is no executioner in that village or that area, then it was known that people be picked out of a crowd in some areas. So that also happened. Also, in some other areas, some criminals were given the option to either become an executioner or be executed themselves. That was another way people became executioners. So if a criminal is doing it, he's already undesirable. So it was seen as giving him a miserable existence of having to be an executioner, have that isolating life, and that would be part of the punishment instead of being executed himself. So that's another way in some regions, in some areas, that people became executioners. So the level of acceptance did vary wildly in different regions. In general, there was a very low acceptance towards them. A lot of times, even when they didn't botch an execution, they would have things thrown at them. They would have people just taunting them, making fun of them. And they would go through a pretty rough time, especially in public. They had to go to the market. They couldn't touch the food. They had to bring their own utensils, their own bag, their own everything, because the people thought that if the executioner touched something, that it would be contaminated by death or whatever they thought. So that was also a belief that made it pretty tough for the executioner. And to be honest, there always has been a very large amount of stigma behind the job of the executioner, even though the executioner did not have a choice most of the time to what job he was doing. He had literally no choice. Even children of executioners could not get honest work. So even though they had no choice, there was still a very large amount of stigma. So a lot of times they just lived alone. They didn't really socialize with other people. In some regions, there was actually laws prohibiting people to dine with executioners and eat with them and talk with them. So like they were forced to be isolated in some areas by law. So that also did happen. And again, this varied by region to region and time period to time period because it did depend on the laws and what was going on and how executioners were seen, treated, and viewed, basically. But overall, wherever they were, they had a tough life. They had to carry the weight of their work. They really only had other executioners to talk to if they had other executioners in their area or near their area that they could connect with. Most of the time, they were the only ones and just them and their family a lot of times. So it was a very isolating job that most people did not want that job. Most people would not even want to kill someone. Like, the whole idea of that, most people did not want to do it. That's why people were picked out of crowds. That's why it ran in the family. Because most people did not want this job. So, that's basically the reality of the social life of the executioner. His work can be very hard on him because a lot of the methods that were carried out in the Middle Ages were quite grim. They were quite graphic. Some of them were drawn out because a lot of times in the Middle Ages they thought that if someone experienced pain in this life, that they would immediately go to heaven after experiencing pain and suffering in this life, after they commit a crime. So that was the view and the outlook in the Middle Ages and early Renaissance period. So the view and outlook that we have today, like today we know that rehabilitation works. We know that we just shouldn't execute someone for theft. We know that, right? We know that torture gets false confessions more than half of the time. We know that now. But in the Middle Ages and in the late early Renaissance period and those times, the outlook was very different. They didn't have the education, the understanding, and what we know today. They actually thought very differently, so it's non-comparable. That's what I want to point out. As well, I'm also going to let you know how this stigma still occurs today to some degree. So, as you know, that I perform mock executions and educational demonstrations, and I teach classes on this topic, and I dress very much like a executioner would have in the Middle Ages every day. So I wear medieval clothing every day. I look different. I look like an executioner. I'm not a real executioner at all. I've never killed someone in my life. I never will. I am against any unlawful activity of any kind, but just the fact that I perform educational demonstrations of mock executions and that I do pro-dom and I have the skills of an executioner, I am still very much treated like one. So I can tell you that the stigma still occurs today to some degree. And I can tell you that when I walk around, I've had people yell out, "filthy executioner." I've had people spit on me, throw things at me, yell in my ears, and a lot of other things. And yeah, the stigma still exists to this day surrounding that kind of stuff. Even if it's not real and it's the topic and it's having just the skills of an executioner, even if you're not a real one, a lot of times people still see you as an executioner, even though you're not. And that is very much the case with me. And I know very well that I was going into something that will make my life harder. I knew that, but I'm okay with it because I have a passion for teaching about the history. I have a passion for learning about this stuff and sharing it with people, sharing the historical accuracies of people. And I also like doing kink, which is a completely separate thing. So I don't regret what I do. I knew going into this that it would be a tough life. I knew there was stigma behind it, but I don't care. I'm happy. I'm happy with myself. I love what I do. And a lot of executioners did take pride in their work because they did their work to the best of their ability. They kept their minds mentally sharp to the best of their ability. And a lot of them were kind people in their everyday life outside their work as executioners. For an example, Franz Schmidt, he actually wanted to be a doctor originally, but his father was called out of a crowd and roped into being an executioner, so Franz had to become an executioner. But on the side of being an executioner, Franz also healed people and helped people with medical issues and wound care and stuff of that nature. Like, he did do good things. Giovanni Bugatti, he was an executioner and he was very good at his job. He took pride in the level of work that he can do, even if it was grim. But outside his work, he painted umbrellas with his wife and sold them and gave them out to people in the village. So they were not necessarily bad people. It was an isolating job. It was a tough job. There was a lot of stigma, and there still is a lot of stigma behind it. But executioners were not necessarily bad people. Just like there's good barbers, there's bad barbers, there's good cooks, there's bad cooks. There's good executioners, and there's bad executioners. So that's just a little bit about the life of the executioner and what they go through, and some of the stigma that still carries into the modern day that personally I have to live with, which I'm okay with. I accept that as hard as it is. So like, subscribe, leave a nice comment, and have a great day, everyone. Peace.